Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Bull Take Scouting Podcast. First off, we'd like to clear up something that happened over the weekend. On Saturday morning, we realized that our Instagram account got disabled, and only like 10 minutes ago, we did it finally reopen to us, and now we have access, but we haven't since Saturday morning, and that explains why we haven't been able to post anything since then. And we will be starting tomorrow morning, going straight into the analysis that we've kind of gotten a delay from because of this. And I think tomorrow morning will be the best and worst day two picks, and then for day three, and then we'll get rolling into our division by division, and within that team by team breakdown of the draft grades for everyone. So that's a little context for our absence on draft analysis this weekend.
Yeah, it was like definitely the worst possible time for a NFL draft Instagram page to get shut down. But
yeah.
The bottom line is we're back now. We're thankful we got it back. And let's hop right into this draft recap because there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, so since we already recapped round one, we're not going to be recapping all of day two right here, but one really intriguing thing was the day two quarterback landing spots. I thought that they were all really interesting and worth talking about. But first, the teams that didn't take a quarterback. Well, we thought that a couple teams like New England or Chicago might take one on day two heading into the draft. They addressed that position in round one, so that was off the board for them. And then we thought maybe Washington would take a quarterback. And I kind of like their approach. I think that they got Samuel Cosmi at that pick in the second round, and that's a potential franchise left tackle. So while they could have taken a shot on one of these quarterbacks, given that they don't have a quarterback of the future on their roster, I don't think you should reach for that when you can take a guy at such a position of need with really high potential to Samuel Cosmi. So I like that approach. And then the Saints, I think they were right to give Jameis Winston this chance to prove himself in 2021. So I do agree with those two teams passing on these quarterbacks.
The Saints did pick a quarterback in day three, though, and we'll get to that a little later in Ian Book. But, yeah, I think Washington was a little surprising for me. I kind of expected them to take a quarterback at some point in the draft. I thought day one it wasn't going to be really possible for them based on they were at 19. They didn't seem like a team that was too willing to trade up. But I mean, they could have made it to 11 and got Justin Fields like the Bears did. I was expecting them to go quarterback in day two. But like I agree with what you said. I'm glad they didn't reach for a guy like you said, Cosmi. I think it was 51. That's great value to me. I had a high second round grade on Cosmi, and like you said, he's a potential franchise left tackle, and that spot's been open since Trent Williams was traded away to the 49ers. I like what they did though, not going quarterback, because to me that shows me that they weren't sold on any of them. So if they're not sold on any of them, I'm glad they stayed away. I'm thinking they're going to go as far as they can with Ryan Fitzpatrick. And in 2022, I think they're a team that you're going to look in prime position to draft a quarterback, whether they're high in the draft or lower, assuming, if they make the playoffs again.
Yeah, as people often say, you want to build the rest of the team before you drop in the quarterback. You don't want to draft a young quarterback, then the team around him isn't good, and that really hurts his development, as we saw with Sam Darnold in New York. But to move on to the teams that actually did draft a quarterback in day two, the first one off the board in day two, making him the sixth quarterback overall drafted in this draft, was Kyle Trask to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I was shocked when this one came in. I was not expecting it, and I don't agree with it. I think that obviously Brady is old. We all know this, but he's still playing really good football. That being said, you probably still only have 2 to 3 years left where you can try to win more rings with him after he already got you one this past year. So I thought this pick should have been used on a guy who could walk in and be a quality starter. We saw last year that in the second round they got Antoine Winfield, and he ended up being a valuable contributor to them. So I was expecting them to do the same this year, and that's not what they did. They went and got Kyle Trask, which is also a puzzling choice for me, because if I'm in that situation and I'm grooming a quarterback behind Brady, I would want somebody that might not be pro ready, but has the traits and the upside. And I think Kyle Trask is a pretty physically limited quarterback who's likely only ever going to be a good backup and spot starter. So it's just a head-scratching move, honestly, for me, and definitely a surprising one. So I want to hear what you think about this pick for the Bucs.
Yeah, like you said, at the end of round 2, I was shocked. The Buccaneers were always a team in the back of my mind to maybe they go quarterback. I was not expecting it round 2. Let's assume Brady has 2 or 3 years left, probably 3 years max. So obviously they need a quarterback to groom for the future. Their backup is I don't even know who their
Blaine
backup.
Gabbert.
Blaine Gabbert. He's not a guy that you're going to be grooming for the future. I think he's a good backup for what they need. Brady's not going to, fingers crossed, he's not going to get hurt. So Blaine Gabbert's a good guy to hold the clipboard. He's a veteran, so he can look at the field and say, hey, not that he's going to tell Tom Brady anything of importance, but this is what I'm seeing on the field. And that's what you want from a reliable backup. And Kyle Trask in round 2 was a shocker to me because, like you said, I don't think Kyle Trask has starting upside at all, really. I don't think he's a guy that you're going to want to groom to be a starter. And if you're picking a quarterback at the back end of round 2, that's kind of what you're hoping, especially when you have a veteran quarterback starting right now. You're hoping the guy you can take at the end of round 2, you're hoping they can become a starter within 2-3 years when your current starter retires. And if I was the Buccaneers, I honestly would not have taken a quarterback at all in round 2. But if I was a scout for the Buccaneers and they came to me and said, hey, we have to take a quarterback at the end of round 2, who would you recommend we take? I would have said Kellen Mond, and we'll get to him in a second. But to me, he's the guy that has the most potential, the most developmental potential to be a starter at the next level out of the 3 that were available in Trask, Mond, and Davis Mills.
Yeah, and so getting to the next quarterback off the board, that was Kellen Mond to the Minnesota Vikings. I actually really like this pick. If you look at their quarterback room behind Kirk Cousins, heading to the draft, it was Nate Stanley and Jake Browning. So needless to say, if Kirk Cousins goes down, you're not in good shape with those backup quarterbacks. So the first thing that this does is this gives a much better insurance policy were Kirk Cousins to go down. And the second thing is Kirk Cousins is an average, maybe even above average quarterback in the NFL, but he's not one of those guys where it's like, all right, the quarterback position, we're not addressing that for the next 5 to 10 years. We've got our guy. He's top 10 in the league. That's not Kirk Cousins. So while with Cousins, you're not in a position where you're constantly looking for a quarterback, reaching for a quarterback. You are still in the position where if there's one that you like, that's good value wherever you're drafting in any particular round, you don't stop yourself from making that selection. I think that's the case with Kellen Mond. I think I like Mond better than Trask and Mills. I think he has starter potential in the NFL, even franchise quarterback potential. I think he's athletic. He's a quick release with a lot of zip on the ball. He can make all the throws. You kind of need to get him to be a little more fluid. He seems a little tight, which limits the use of his athleticism because he's actually a really good athlete. You just need to get him to use it more often and then just clean up some of the things like ball placement and accuracy and timing and stuff like that. But there's definitely the traits for him to become a franchise quarterback. So I really like the pick because it's a better insurance policy and it gives them a shot. You know what? What if he does pan out and we end up having an upgrade?
Yeah, so what I've kind of thought about this Kellen Mond pick, and I like it more and more as I think about it for the Vikings situation. Like I said about Mond earlier, he's a guy with developmental upside to be a quality starter in the league. I think he has a wide range, a high ceiling and a really low floor, depending on how he can develop. But where the Vikings are right now, they have Kirk Cousins obviously under contract as a starter. Like you said, no backup. So I think Kellen Mond immediately is the backup quarterback in Minnesota. He's the second best quarterback in that room right now, behind Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is under quarterback in 2021 and then 2022, and then he can become a free agent. And due to the Kirk Cousins contract that he signed, there's no way for the Vikings to franchise tag him. Reportedly this offseason, the Vikings went to Kirk Cousins and asked if he wanted to do an extension. He basically said no. He said he doesn't want an extension. So I think this Kellen Mond pick did a few things for them. One, like I said, a potential starter that can be better than Kirk Cousins and provide an upgrade. Two, it provides the Vikings some leverage in this whole Kirk Cousins discussion, right? So maybe Kellen Mond doesn't, develop 2 years down the line. He doesn't develop to what they would have expected from him. They still have him in their back pocket when they bring Kirk Cousins to the table to negotiate a new contract and say, hey, Kirk, we don't need you anymore. We have Kellen Mond. He's been in our system for 2 years. If you want to walk, that's fine, and we'll bring in Kellen Mond, and he'll be just as good as you. So for me, it's two things. Kellen Mond can be an upgrade from Kirk Cousins in 2 years, or if he doesn't develop, he doesn't pan out, it's still another chip to bring to the table and say, hey, Kirk, we don't need you. Maybe be able to get him at a little less salary.
Yeah, I like how you brought in that dimension of this selection, because with Mond, you have the shot at him being the potential franchise quarterback, and if you don't, not only do you have a better QB2, but you also have that piece of leverage at the negotiating table. And so the next quarterback selection was, I think, the pick right after that. Davis Mills, the quarterback from Stanford, was the Houston Texans' first pick under new general manager Nick Caserio, and I just do not like this pick at all. And I'm seeing from your reaction that you don't either. The Texans are, first of all,
a mess.
They're a mess. They're a mess. And the elephant in the room is Deshaun Watson, and I don't think he's ever going to play for the Texans again, be it that he ends up being suspended or banned from the league because he's found guilty of those sexual assault allegations, or if he's cleared of those, I think he'll be on his way out of there anyway. But so even with that, I don't understand the Davis Mills selection. First of all, I'm not that high in Davis Mills. I think he could become a starter, but right now his accuracy is just way too much of a mess beyond 10 yards for that to really be something that you're confident in. And I just think that, quite frankly, I think the Houston Texans are going to be the worst team in football in 2021. That should give them the first overall pick and the choice of the best quarterback available in the 2022 NFL draft class, meaning this Davis Mills pick is probably just going to be a complete waste, because they're probably going to end up with a quarterback in the first round next year anyway. Right now, your first pick is at 67. What you have to do with your roster that really just doesn't have that much talent is just find a guy who can be a quality starter. Top player on your board, regardless of position, that's who should have been the pick, not Davis Mills.
The pick made no sense. Okay, the Texans, in all the years I've watched football, the earliest season that I can remember is 2009. This is the worst team I've ever seen. I mean,
wow. It is worse than an 0-16 team?
Than the Browns in 2016. The Browns had a little bit of talent on that team. I don't mean to offend anyone on the Texans roster, because they're all 53 of them are better football players than I am. But who on that roster even gives you a slimmer of hope? I'm not saying they will go.
The left tackle that they traded a lot for.
Wow. How many touchdowns is the left tackle going to score for you? 0. How many stops is he going to make on defense? 0. Yes, you're right. Laramie Tunsil is a really good talent. But in the grand scheme of things, when your team is that bad, the left tackle is not going to do anything to help you.
That's true.
I mean, their roster is awful. It's so bad. People have said it's like an expansion team. That's exactly what it is. They have the roster of an expansion team right now. So when you have that bad of a roster and you don't have a first-round pick, you don't have a second-round pick, your first pick is in the third round, you need to be doing whatever you can to make sure you hit on that third-round pick, and that third-round pick is a quality starter for you. And, I mean, like you said, Davis Mills, I had a mid-fourth-round grade on him. I think he's a guy with some developmental upside, but it's kind of a long shot, and he's probably going to end up as a backup in the league. And in regards to the whole Deshaun Watson situation, when a team with that bad of a roster spends their first pick on a quarterback, to me that means there is no way that Deshaun Watson is coming back to the Texans. I don't want to get in on the legal situation. I don't know any of the facts other than what we've seen in the public. I don't want to touch on that. But I've heard some rumors that Watson most likely, or people are expecting that he's not going to play in 2021. And I think the Texans are done with him. He's done with the Texans, regardless of the outcome of his legal situation. And to me, that was just the final, nail in the coffin, that Deshaun Watson is never playing for the Houston Texans again. But the Davis Mills pick made no sense. I mean, Just why?
Yeah, so basically the Texans passed on one of the only chances in this draft to get a quality starter, and for a quarterback that has very, very little chance of being their long-term future at the position. And let's move on to our next section, which is first we're going to break down the best drafts that we thought teams had, and then some of the worst drafts. And I want to start off with the Vikings because it is just so impressive the talent they accumulated in this draft. First of all, and they're honestly not even getting the recognition for it. I'm seeing these draft grades where they're being graded middle of the pack, and it's beyond me. I think this is just because there's no flashy pick, but from a scout's perspective, this is an incredible draft. First of all, they managed to trade down from pick 14 to pick 23 and still get a guy who's going to be a quality left tackle in Christian Darrisaw. And then they have 4 round 3 picks. They pick Kellen Mond, and we already broke that down. And then the next 3, Chaz Surratt, I have an early second-round grade on him. Wyatt Davis, I have an early second-round grade on him. And Patrick Jones, I have a mid-second-round grade on him. So those are 3 quality starters that I think they're getting in the 3rd round, on top of a franchise left tackle and a guy who has the potential to be a franchise quarterback. It's just an incredible draft from the Vikings. And way down the board, Jalen Twyman in the 6th round is fantastic value. So I think the Vikings are one of the real winners, maybe even the best draft from any team in this draft.
Yeah, I mean, A+ draft for the Vikings. Like you said, the issue with the general consensus is, they didn't make a flashy pick. They didn't pick a quarterback in the 1st round. They didn't pick one of the top wide receivers. I don't care. They picked a top 15 talent at left tackle. But they got him at 23. They traded down from 14 to 23, picked up 2 third-rounders, and picked the same guy they would have picked at 13. To me, that's a great trade. And then, like you said, they hit. Now, barring none of these players have played in the NFL yet, judging by both of our pre-draft grades, they hit on all 3 or all 4 of those third-rounders. Obviously, I was a little lower on Mon than an early third-round grade, but that's just kind of how it works with quarterbacks. You're going to have to pick them higher than you have them graded if you want to get them. But then, like you said, Chaz Surratt, that's a great pick. I think he's a guy with huge upside. We've talked about him multiple times on the podcast. I think he's going to be a true really good starting linebacker for the Vikings. And I think Mike Zimmer is going to help develop him a lot. Mike Zimmer is a great defensive mind. And if you look, they've developed other linebackers in the past. And then I'm not going to really say too much about the other 2 because you brought them up, but Wyatt Davis and Patrick Jones, both 2 other guys with second-round grades for me. And just Jalen Twyman in the 6th round, he's a guy that I have a third-round grade on, and he kind of got lost in the shuffle because he opted out, but he's really, really good.
Yeah, and another draft that I loved is the Cleveland Browns. They're in a position where they don't have any glaring needs, and they've got the quarterback position wrapped up, and they would just needed to head into this draft and acquire talent, just get better, get even better than they are right now to really try to take that step forward as a franchise. They already went to the divisional round last year, trying to get even better, and I think they did just that. Greg Newsome at pick 26, I thought was really good value. They got Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah at pick 52. I love everything he brings to the table with his speed, his instincts, his coverage ability, his effort. Love that player. Anthony Schwartz, I thought was a bit of a reach, but why not get a guy who you can really send deep and threaten vertically? And then James Hudson is a potential starting tackle that they got in the 4th round. Tommy Togiai can be a starting defensive tackle in the 4th round once again. I think Richard LeCount in the 5th round can be a starting safety. And Demetric Felton is a really exciting hybrid running back wide receiver talent where if you have a role for him, he can definitely make an impact for you. And he got him in the 6th round. So really, when you include day 3 into this analysis, the Browns got a really nice mix of quality starters and impact players. So I think this was a really good draft for the Browns.
You said if you include day 3, it's a really good draft. I think even if you don't include day 3, JOK might have been the best pick overall, just because
value pick. Yeah.
Value pick, exactly. And he fell because of a heart condition, came up late, but that was eventually cleared up with the team doctors, obviously. So they picked him in the 2nd round. that was a great pick. And once he started to fall in the second round, we knew something was up. We didn't know what it was, but it did eventually come out. Like you said, I thought James Hudson was a really, really good pick, really solid upside. And I think worst case, he could be a really, really reliable backup, a swing tackle.
Yeah.
If you go into jumbo set, you could bring him in as a sixth offensive lineman. So I think that's really good value all around for the Browns. Now, moving on to the Bears, we talked about them a bunch in our day one recap, so I won't spend too much time on them. But Justin Fields at number 11, I mean, that was a great pick. The Bears needed a quarterback badly. They only gave up a first-round pick next year for him, which, I mean, if you said we have to use our pick this year and trade in a first-round pick from next year and we get our franchise quarterback of the future, any team in the NFL would make that trade immediately. So Great trade for them. And then in round 2, Tevin Jenkins, I thought really solid pick. I had a late day one grade on him. I think he's going to be a starting offensive tackle or guard at the next level. So really good value for them.
Yeah, contrary to the Vikings and the Browns, this isn't really just that they had like 6-7 picks that were really good. This is a team that has really struggled at the quarterback position the last few years. They've hit and they've missed as we know very well. But this is a team that was in the playoffs, having a mix of Mitchell Trubisky and Nick Foles throughout the regular season, and now they're getting Justin Fields. I really like Fields. We don't need to talk about that too much because we've been over this time and time again. But if you're in a draft where you finally get that franchise quarterback when you've already managed to be a playoff team with poor quarterback play, and then you go get a quality starting right tackle, which is also a position of need and a highly important position to protect that new franchise quarterback, you don't really need to have 6-7 great picks for this to be a really good draft. You won this draft. And to move on to the Jets, this is almost a similar situation where they gave up some draft capital to trade up in the first round. After they picked their franchise quarterback in Zach Wilson, they got Elijah Vera-Tucker. He's a left guard. I think he's going to be a Pro Bowler in the NFL. And then they really did ignore a couple of their defensive needs like edge rusher and cornerback, and those are incredibly important. But the Jets really weren't going to contend in 2021 anyway, and they ended up getting a couple other really dangerous weapons for Zach Wilson and Elijah Moore, and Michael Carter at the top of the 4th round was fantastic value. So I really like how they're building that team. And it was clear that they picked Zach Wilson, and then the plan for the rest of the draft was helping him be successful. And I think they did just that. So the defensive picks, they can come in free agency next year, in the draft next year. The team isn't going to be going to the playoffs this year anyway, I think. And so it's really a good draft for the Jets, getting that offense and the quarterback position in good shape. They hope, finally.
Yeah, after 50 years, which is forever for most Jets fans, including myself. And, just touch on it quickly. Like you said, they did ignore some needs in the defensive side of the ball. But you know what? I think that's okay. Like you said, they're a completely rebuilding team. It doesn't look like they'll make the playoffs this year. What they did was surround Zach Wilson with a lot of talent. And their offense is really young and really, really talented. And like you said, they picked Elijah Vera-Tucker, Elijah Moore, and Michael Carter. I think those are all 3 guys that will really help. I almost said Sam Darnold, Zach Wilson. I think all 3 of those picks will really help Zach Wilson transition to the NFL and make his transition a lot easier than the former Jets quarterback Sam Darnold's was. Zach Wilson has a lot of help around him. I think he's going to have a lot easier year one, and probably he's in the best situation that he possibly could be for being drafted to the Jets. But I really like what they did with surrounding him with a lot of young talent.
Yeah, and I think now we can move on to some of the worst drafts. And I mean, at the top of the list has got to be the Texans. We already talked about Davis Mills, which is really a disastrous pick. But after that, like I like Nico Collins. I think he was good value there. But man, when we've already been over how pitiful this roster is, you don't trade up. You don't trade up multiple picks to go get a guy like Nico Collins when you really need each pick that you have to be able to fortify that roster. And plus, when there are wide receivers that I had rated higher, like Austin Watkins and Kate Johnson, they go undrafted, and you're trading up for Collins when your roster is nowhere near Nico Collins away from being even a half decent team. I just can't get on board with that. And I really did like the Brevin Jordan pick though on day 3, but that doesn't really salvage what they did with that Mills pick and with the decision to trade up back into the third round.
Yeah, I'm not going to spend on it. We talked about it a lot when we talked about Mills, but when you don't have a first round pick, you don't have a second round pick, you take a guy in the third round with your first pick that has a long way to go to even have potential to be a starter. Then you trade up with your next pick, and you have one of the worst roster in the league. You miss the whole point of a draft for a rebuilding team.
Yeah.
So moving on now to the Saints, man, their first round pick in Peyton Turner was probably the most surprising of the night. We heard some rumors from Tony Pauling that Peyton Turner would be a guy that's going to go a lot earlier than expected, and maybe even the end of the first round. But I didn't believe it. The talent is, to me, and to you as well, the talent is not there at all. We both graded him as like a fifth round pick, I think. And just when you take a guy with a fifth round talent in the first round, that automatically makes it one of the worst drafts.
Yeah, I'm being honest. Maybe that was a little harsh, and maybe he can be a serviceable starter. But I think that's his ceiling. And you picked him in the first round. He doesn't have explosiveness or juice off the edge. But we already broke down this pick, and it's that they made a really bad first round pick, and after that, they didn't really recover from that. I mean, Pete Werner's a fine pick in the second round. I don't think it's good value. I had a late third round grade on him. He can probably be a starter, but he won't be as good of a player as some of the other guys on the board. I don't really understand the Ian Book pick. I think that you've got a guy who has a shot to be your guy at quarterback, and Jameis Winston. We know Sean Payton loves Taysom Hill. He's going to be that QB2. He's going to be on the field even with Jameis Winston being the QB1. I don't think Ian Book is worth a fourth round pick. I think he can stick around the league as a QB3, but in the fourth round you can still get an impact player. And then lastly, they have a glaring need at cornerback, and they waited until the third round to pick a cornerback who hasn't played since 2019 in Paulson Adebo. So I don't know if they really strengthened that position like we thought they would, because a lot of us thought they were going to take one at 28th overall, and maybe there wasn't great value there. But regardless, I think that had to be addressed before the third round. And on a different note, that's why I don't like having glaring needs going back into the draft. Like just sign someone in free agency at that position, because the draft it shouldn't be filling needs. It should just be taking the best players available and getting the best value possible at each pick. So they kind of put themselves in this position where it does play into the draft being poor that they waited until third round to get a cornerback, because they just had that big of a need there.
So before I touch on the Saints pick, I want to highlight something that you said about, filling needs in free agency. I think, that's a really good thing to bring up, because that's kind of the best way to go about it. Unless you're in the top 5 and you have a quarterback need, or let's say,
left tackle, edge rusher
need, and you have a top offensive tackle in the draft. Or say in this draft, which was a really, really deep wide receiver draft, maybe in that case you don't need to sign a wide receiver in free agency, because at some point there will be a wide receiver that's most likely BPA or the second highest rated player on your board at the time of picking. And in that case, whatever, you can save that for the draft. But like going back to the Saints, the Ian Book pick was really confusing. I think he's a guy that, has potential to be a second string quarterback in the league. I think he won a lot at Notre Dame. He seemed really high character. Most of the Notre Dame guys do. And I think he knows how to play the quarterback position and not lose you games. So to me, he's a solid backup. But I didn't think the Saints needed that. Like you said, they have Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill. I think that's a good quarterback room. I think Winston will start, but who knows what comes out of that. So the Ian Book pick didn't really make sense to me. And I think you mentioned the cornerback need, and maybe there wasn't guys that we had a first round grade on available at their pick in the first round. But I thought a guy like Eric Stokes would have been a fine pick at 28. The Packers took him at 29. I had a 2.1 on Eric Stokes, so that wouldn't have been much of a reach, especially to fill your biggest position of need.
Yeah, some people are making out the Stokes pick for Green Bay to be this terrible pick, huge reach. I thought Stokes was the best corner available, and it's such a need. We saw how they got burnt by the Bucks in the NFC Championship game. I thought it was definitely a solid pick. But anyway, the next team that sometimes there's a team that quietly has a good draft, like the Vikings, and sometimes there's a team that quietly has a bad draft. And I think that's what the Los Angeles Rams did. I know they didn't have a first-round pick, but still, at pick 57, I thought there were a lot of good players available. And, man, I do not think that Tutu Atwell is worth a second-round pick at all. I have a late fifth-round grade on him because, in essence, I think he's a speedster, and that's really it. I think he's pretty one-dimensional. I don't think he's a good route runner. We know he weighed in under 150 pounds at, I think it was the combine or something of the sort, and that shows on tape where he is so susceptible to route contact where any cornerback can disrupt the route so easily. So when you combine the lack of size, which also means that he's not really he can't ever be a jump ball guy or anything. It just his only attribute is speed, and I don't even think he's going to be an NFL starter because you need more than that in the NFL. So I didn't like that pick, and after that, I know they took Ernest Jones in the third round. That was earlier than people expected. Robert Rochelle wasn't that good a pick in the fourth round either. So it's just they just each pick they didn't. It wasn't an absolutely terrible pick where everybody's like, wow, what do they do? But every pick was poor in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think they reached on almost all their picks. The three picks that you mentioned, and Tutu Atwell, Robert Rochelle,
and Bobby Brown was a reach as well.
Say that again?
Bobby Brown was a reach as well.
Yeah, and I think Jacob Harris was the fourth round, I think. And to me, that was also a reach. I think
every pick.
I had a late sixth round grade on him, and I don't think anyone really expected him to go in the fourth round of the draft. And, like you said, I thought saying that they had a under the radar poor draft opposite of the Vikings was a really good way to put it.
Yeah, and so another like the last team that had a subpar draft, I think the Raiders, and this has been really publicized. And honestly, I'm going to say it wasn't as bad as people are saying it was. It was still poor, but it wasn't as bad as the prior three. They took Alex Leatherwood too early, and with Christian Darrisaw on the board, that's not a good pick. I think that Trayvon Murray was a terrific pick in round two. That they needed safety, or they needed better coverage in general so badly, and he provides that with really great athleticism, ball skills, and so I think that's a great value pick for them. And then they took Malcolm Kuntz, who's a really high upside edge rusher with a lot of bend, and he's really slippery, but third round's a little too rich. I think he's a little bit of a developmental guy, so I graded him in the fourth round. And then Divine Diablo was poor value in the third round. I don't see that. And then They went out and got three safeties in this draft because they also picked Tyree Gillespie. So I don't understand why the three safeties. I thought they could have taken Trayvon Murray and called it a day on safeties and gone and helped out other positions. But it was a weird draft for the Raiders, which is something we're getting really accustomed to.
Yeah, and you mentioned the three safeties. They also have Jonathan Abrams in the secondary as well. So, I thought Moehrig was a really good pick in round two. He was my number one safety on my board. I thought Abrams and Moehrig would have been fine. They're really kind of opposite players. Moehrig's more of the coverage guy, and Abrams is more of the downhill run filler tackle. So they would have played really well off each other. But then the fact that they went and got two more, and they weren't even like really late in the draft where it's all right, we're just going to take a depth piece of safety. They took, like you said, the third round and the fourth round. So to me, that doesn't make any sense, especially when they're a team that, has some needs on that roster. Like you said, Malcolm Kuntz was a guy that I liked in like the fourth round range. But like you said, the third round was a little too high. Maybe, he's from Buffalo, and the last guy they drafted from Buffalo was Khalil Mack, and they traded him away. Maybe they, trying to do something there. But, I felt like they reached on most guys. Like you said, Alex Leatherwood wasn't a horrendous reach. I had a mid-second round grade on him. So they kind of he took him a round ahead of where I would have taken him. But the biggest issue was there were guys like Christian Darrisaw was on the board. I thought Sam Cosmi was on the board that I had.
Yeah, Tevin Jenkins.
Him as well. So
they're playing Leatherwood. They're playing Leatherwood at right tackle, and Tevin Jenkins was on the board. So that would have been a much better pick too.
So there was at least three guys, but like you said, it wasn't awful. It's not getting an F, pick. And the Murray pick was really good in the second round. So
Definitely.
people making it out to be an absolutely abysmal draft. It wasn't a good draft by any means, but I think it's it's kind of the Raiders their mantra now to seemingly reach on guys.
Yeah, just really odd drafts all around the last few that we've seen from the Raiders. And I don't know if we're going to get to see this regime make another draft. Gruden will be staying, but I don't know about Mayock come a year from now. But one talking point I wanted to go over was the Bengals' draft. It really infuriated me. When they picked Jamar Chase 5th overall, this whole time I'd been saying that pick is going to be decided by what they do on day 2 at the offensive line, and they did not do enough. I thought that, first of all, Penei Sewell should have been the pick because you have to keep your franchise quarterback upright. He coming off an ACL tear, they should have known that. And I think Penei Sewell was a slightly better talent. But if Jamar Chase he could be a superstar at wide receiver. So I thought that if they managed to get a really good tackle at the top of the second round and then like a really good guard at the top of the third round, that could be a really good draft, even with passing on Penei Sewell. And they could have had a combo like Samuel Cosmi at the top of round 2 and Wyatt Davis at the top of round 3. And that would have been an A, maybe even A+ draft. That's how good it would have been. But they traded down. They took Jackson Carman, who I don't think can be a tackle in the NFL. I have a 4th round grade on him. Maybe he'll be a starting guard. And then they didn't address the position until day 3. And they made a couple of picks that I liked in Dante Smith and Trey Hill, and I think those guys could actually turn out to be starters, but still, they had to go out and right at pick 38, pick a quality tackle. The best one on the board would have been either Tevin Jenkins or Samuel Cosmi. They would have both been good picks, and they just they did not do enough for Joe Burrow on the offensive line to protect him, and that really bothers me. So I want to see Joe Burrow be successful, as do a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, so like I said on our day 1 recap, I was okay with the Jamar Chase pick, assuming they got Sam Cosmi in the second round, and Sam Cosmi was there for them for the picking in the second round, and I said, oh well, they'll take Cosmi and Chase, and I thought that would have been a really really nice combo for them.
Yeah.
But like you said, they traded down, took Jackson Carman, who is not going to be a tackle, so their tackle need is just still there, and it really didn't make any sense. They had so much potential, like you said, picking Jamar Chase in the first round and then combining that with Sam Cosmi or Tevin Jenkins, which I have Jenkins higher, but Cosmi fills the left tackle role, while Jenkins would have filled the right tackle role. And then, like you said, a guy like Wyatt Davis in round 3, that would have been a great offensive line, or 2 great offensive linemen to add to some of the pieces they already have. And that would have helped Joe Burrow out so much, but like you said, I think they really made a big mistake trading down, giving up Sam Cosmi basically, and Tevin Jenkins, and taking Jackson Carman.
Yeah, I know what a lot of people who were defending the Jamar Chase pick were saying was, oh, they don't need tackle that badly. They've got Jonah Williams on the left side. They signed Riley Reef at right tackle. Since when does that sound like a good tackle combo? I mean, Jonah Williams had an injury, and I liked him coming out of college. But a lot of people did think he would be better at guard than tackle. I think he's fine at tackle. If you were to go out and get that franchise left tackle or right tackle, and then maybe if it's that left tackle, you can move Williams to the right side or even into guard. And it's just I thought they could really use a very good bookend tackle on either side and then kick Joe Williams or Riley Reef inside. And they didn't do that. I thought they should have gone and taken a tackle and a guard, and neither happened. So we'll see if they manage to protect Joe Burrow. But it was frustrating from that perspective.
Let's just take a quick look at what that offensive line could have looked like. Let's assume they take Penei Sewell at 5.
Yeah,
you would have Sewell at left tackle. You could have bumped Williams into left guard.
Yeah,
you have Billy Price at center.
Yeah,
who I think he still has some potential there.
He's a solid starter.
Yeah. You have Riley Reef at left tackle. Then in round 2,
at right tackle.
At right tackle. Sorry, round 2. Then you could have said, okay, maybe we'll go wide receiver here, or you could have taken a guy like Tevin Jenkins, who you could have either A, put at right tackle or put at right guard. Now imagine that offensive line: Penei Sewell, Jonah Williams, Billy Price, Tevin Jenkins, Riley Reef. That would have been one of the best offensive lines in the league.
or if you really want to reunite Joe Burrow with a talented teammate, you could go Penei Sewell in round 1, Terrace Marshall round 2, and then in the third round you grab Wyatt Davis, and then you have a wide receiver room of Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, Terrace Marshall, which is really young, really talented, an ascending wide receiver room that is going to be above average, and then your offensive line would be Penei Sewell from left to right, Penei Sewell, Jonah Williams, Billy Price, Wyatt Davis, Riley Reef, a good offensive line. They didn't have a bad draft because they got a really good player in Jamar Chase, and they got a couple other solid pieces, but it's just with that big a need for a young franchise quarterback, they just didn't do enough. And I want to talk about another thing is this is a big point of intrigue in this offseason was Urban Meyer making his coaching debut in the NFL and getting full personnel control. We knew he was going to be reunited with Trevor Lawrence, but what do you make of the rest of his draft? Because I really had an attentive eye out for this one.
I think their draft was kind of back and forth. Obviously, everyone loves the Trevor Lawrence pick. He was the number 1 player on the board, the best quarterback that I've ever scouted. So obviously that pick's going to get A+ because, how can you give it anything less? I like the ETN pick in round 2. With their second pick in round 1. I thought I had a 1.6 on 1.7 on ETN.
I had a 1.6.
Yeah, so I thought that was good value. I did think they had some other positions of need, however, and I think where their franchise is right now, I didn't think they should have gone running back in round 1 just because they had a bunch of other needs. And you can get a running back later. I'm not saying that ETN was a bad pick because he was drafted right about where I had him graded. I just think when you're taking a running back in round 1, I want the team that takes him to be like the Steelers, who, they're still contending, a playoff team, and that running back's going to help put them over the hump. I do like them pairing ETN again with Trevor Lawrence, but I thought there were some bigger positions of need that they could have gone in round 1.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go out and say I actually love the ETN pick. I think that I'm seeing some people give D's to this pick, and they are going to regret that when they see the type of player Travis Etienne is going to become in the NFL. I think that obviously James Robinson had a fantastic rookie season, but he's not that dynamic, and you're going to get a new dimension to that offense by adding Travis Etienne to the mix with the athleticism. He brings the home run threat that he is. He can break off a big play on any down, and he's really developing as a receiver. He has the potential to be an Alvin Kamara type weapon out of the backfield, and he's former college teammates with Trevor Lawrence. I really like that pick because he's making that offense a lot better. It's a new dimension to the offense that they wouldn't have had otherwise. He was my second best player available on the board after Rashad Bateman. So there's no way that I would think that that's a poor pick when you're getting really good value for a player that I graded inside the top 20. So, I like that pick. But it's after that I really dislike it because, they got their quarterback in the future in Trevor Lawrence and a dynamic running back in Travis Etienne. But I didn't like any of the picks after that. I thought they had a wealth of picks and they could have used them better. Tyson Campbell was definitely not the best player available at the top of round 2. I had an early third round grade on him. Walker Little, when you pass on Samuel Cosme for Walker Little, Walker Little has so much potential, but he hasn't even played really since 2018 with injuries and the opt-out. So there's just so much risk there. I had a late third because of that risk. Andre Cisco is a guy who I don't even think can be a starter for you because you can't rely on him to be able to tackle the ball carrier. He's really passive against the run. So he's just a guy you're putting in sub packages against the pass where he does have tremendous coverage ability and ball skills, but that you're not taking that at the top of the third round. And so it's a little frustrating because you see these teams that have so many picks and you want to see a really good draft because it's satisfying when a team has a really good draft. Like the Vikings, you look at that and you're like, you really appreciate that as a scout. And I think that the Jaguars could have done a lot better with their picks outside of the first round.
Yeah, I'm not going to really touch on the Campbell, Walker Little, and Andre Cisco picks. I think we have the same opinion on those. Jordan Smith was a guy I liked. I think they took him a little bit higher than I had him graded. They took him at the top of the fourth round, obviously, but he's a guy that I think has high upside. He needs a few years to develop. He's really raw, but the athletic potential is there. kind of contrary to what the Jets did. I feel like, they took ETN to help Trevor Lawrence out in the first round. But then other than that, none of their picks really centered around Trevor Lawrence too much to help him out. Obviously, they did take an offensive lineman in Walker Little, but he's a huge question mark. They could look really smart with that pick a few years down the road, but he's just not a guy that I would have liked to take a chance on at the spot that they took him. So, Walk a little 50-50 maybe. But, other than ETN, really, they didn't do too much to help out Trevor Lawrence, and that offense isn't really that good anyways.
Well, I think the defense are really poor too, and I would have loved this draft if they were just getting good value at each pick. And at the end of the day, I don't see it with the selections that they did make. And but now let's wrap this up with two winners of this draft. Both quarterbacks in the NFL. The first one is Sam Darnold. I mean, he kind of already won when they passed on Justin Fields. Let's be honest. I know Ian Rappaport reported right before the pick that this is either Justin Fields or J.C. Horn, which couldn't be any more different. So that made for a really interesting pick. But I'm sure Sam Darnold's watching that live. He's just I don't even know what he's thinking when he thought that he was going to be the guy. And I mean, they ended up making him the guy. They picked J.C. Horn, and after that, the whole focus was on helping Sam Darnold. Terrace Marshall, towards the end of the second round, is a fantastic pick. I have a first-round grade on him. I think he's a tremendous player. And then in the third round, they got Brady Christensen, who's a high upside left tackle. He did great in interviews, apparently. So I mean, when you have a guy who has those athletic traits and it seems like he's a good kid, willing to work hard, coachable, that can end up being really good, especially at a position that's so important for a young quarterback. And then they got Tommy Tremble. I know you love Tremble. I like him quite a bit as well. He's going to be instantly an incredible blocker for the run game for Sam Darnold, and there's a lot of upside to uncover in the passing game. So for him, like if you're watching this draft, it's just everything he didn't have in New York, he's getting in Carolina. He's got a really what looks like a really good head coach in Matt Rule. We know he's got a great culture, so that already is so different than what was going on in New York with Adam Gase to step into a building that's really has a really good culture. And then Joe Brady is a really good offensive coordinator, and I think he fits well into that system. And he's got a supporting cast that includes Christian McCaffrey, DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, and now Terrace Marshall and Tommy Tremble. So we're going to find out now how good Sam Darnold is of a quarterback, because he was in the absolute worst situation with the Jets, and now he's in a really good situation, and the Panthers did everything they could in this draft to help him be successful. And I'm excited to see whether or not he works out for them.
Yeah, and moving on to the other big winner from the draft, Lamar Jackson for the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, he didn't really have a wide receiver. He didn't have a wide receiver one. We talked about this in our day one recap. Rashad Bateman was a great pick for the Baltimore Ravens. He instantly becomes a wide receiver one for that Ravens offense. I think he'll fit in really nicely alongside Hollywood Brown, with a combination of Hollywood Brown's speed and Rashad Bateman's size and strength and route running. I think they're going to really complement each other really nicely. But then Tylan Wallace, a guy they got later in the draft who kind of fell due to the depth of the wide receiver position, he's a guy that I really like. I think he's a good route runner also, but he's also a deep threat. So I think having him and Rashad Bateman in the same draft and then pairing them with Hollywood Brown makes it really, really interesting for the Ravens offense that really couldn't throw the ball at all last year. And I think this is going to show me if Lamar Jackson can be a good passer and distributor of the football, because he has no excuses now. There's going to be guys open. Bateman's going to get open. Hollywood Brown is now going to get open. I think Tylan Wallace is going to be a guy that's going to get open as well.
Yeah, it went from a bad wide receiver room that really stopped us from seeing how good of a passer Lamar Jackson can be, as you said. And now they're really setting him up well, because when he now has a couple big-bodied, reliable, sure-handed receivers who run good routes. So but Bateman, excellent routes. So it was so important in this draft to address the wide receiver position and get a couple of reliable targets for Lamar Jackson, and the Ravens did that in a really impressive way with Rashad Bateman and Tylan Wallace, who are both like some of the best values in the entire draft.
Yeah, totally. Wallace and Bateman were great values, and when you get two really good values from the same team, that's a really good draft. So I think the Ravens draft is another one that's kind of flying under the radar. Not as many like extremely high value picks as a team like the Vikings had, but they hit on the positions of need, and their biggest one was wide receiver, and they got both the picks at really good value.
Yeah, I totally agree. And is there anything else you want to talk about in this draft before we wrap it up?
I think I just wanted to put you on the spot and say,
yeah, go ahead.
Obviously we don't have all the picks in front of us. We don't have photographic memory, so we don't have all 259 picks memorized or anything. But if you can just think off the top of your head, what was your favorite pick of the whole draft if you take into account both talent, positional need, and value?
Now that's a really good question.
I'll let you think about that one, and I'll bring up mine, and mine has to be Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I think, we said this in the lead up to the draft that linebacker was probably the biggest position of need for the Browns. And you had JOK mocked to the Browns in the first round. The fact that they got him in the second round, obviously he fell to his medicals, but he got checked off on those. The doctors eventually cleared him. They said he was good to go. So I think getting a guy with a mid-first round talent in round 2 at your biggest position of need, to me, that's one of the best picks in the draft.
Yeah, we just talked about him, but for me, the answer is Rashad Bateman. You know how much I've loved Bateman throughout this process. Starting, I think, in the right after Caleb Farley went off the board, he was my best player available. He lasted until pick 27. He was a huge area of need where they have a quarterback who's going to be coming up for a second contract. They need to really figure out whether or not he's a guy you want to pay top dollar to, and they need to give him finally some reliable big targets at the wide receiver position, and they got a really good one in Rashad Bateman. Great size, great physicality, great hands, great route running, and he's going to be consistently getting open and offering himself to Lamar Jackson, which is so important. He really needs that security blanket at the wide receiver position, and he's a guy that I graded in the mid-first round. So my favorite pick is Rashad Bateman in this draft.
Yeah, and I think just to give a quick preview of the post we're going to have up tomorrow with the best day 2 picks, I think a couple more that come to mind. Both Josh Myers and Creed Humphrey, the two centers taken back-to-back, Myers by the Packers and Humphrey by the Chiefs. Both big positions of need and both really good values, in my opinion. And then I think a guy, Azeez Ojulari, he comes to mind. He was a guy that I had a first-round grade on. He also fell due to medicals. There's kind of a theme going, guys that fall due to medicals from some teams, others check them off. Those are really good values as long as you're comfortable with the medical concerns.
Yeah, I think that we often see that being the case. But thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. It's been fun recapping this draft. This represents so much hard work for us that we've put in over the last few months to keep you guys up to speed and giving the best quality content that we could. And now we're gonna be giving you some really good analysis in the next couple of weeks. So make sure to stick with us. And once that's over, of course, we're already looking at 2022. I mean, it doesn't stop here at Bull Take Scouting, and we're excited to have you guys with us throughout all this.
Yeah, and I just want to leave a little teaser. We're hoping to have a fingers crossed. We're hoping we can pull in.
I think we should hold off on that. See if it actually happens and keep the surprise. I think that's enough of a teaser.
No, I'm just gonna say that we're hoping we're gonna have some big things coming and hopefully some good interviews. We had 2 this year. I just want to say congratulations to both those guys.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Coyote Iwasika and Emmanuel Rugamba, they both signed with NFL teams, so that's huge news. We really enjoyed the interview process this year with those 2 guys, and we're hoping we can bring in some more guys this year and hopefully some big names.
Yeah, I thought you were going to reveal our number 1 target for us to have shortly. But I mean, the advantage of hopefully contacting these guys over the summer and even starting pretty soon is that we can use our scouting to hit on a couple guys before the hype comes who could end up being pretty high picks come next April. So stay tuned for the content that's to come, and the interviews that we'll have a few of them this summer, and they'll definitely be guys to watch out for in 2021.
Yeah, so that wraps up this podcast. Thanks everyone for listening. And yeah, the NFL draft came to an end on Saturday, but I think some of the most fun parts of the draft season, especially for us at Bold Take Scouting, those are really going to be coming when most people consider the off season of the draft. So make sure you stay tuned. Keep listening to the podcast. Keep checking us out on Instagram that we thankfully got back. Just today. So be sure to stay tuned for all of that and the news coming. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week.